But I want us to look at today the destructive nature of envy. Envy is defined as feelings of discontent. It can also be a resentful longing, which is aroused by someone else's possessions or some fortune or some qualities that they may possess. Noted researcher Harold Coffin once said that envy is the art of counting the other fellow's blessings instead of your own. Envy is closely aligned with jealousy, and often we tend to use it interchangeably and we mix it up. However, they are distinctly different. The psychologists will tell us that envy occurs when we lack a desired attribute that is enjoyed by another. Simply put, that means that envy is engendered in ourselves when we don't have something and we see somebody else have it. Jealousy, on the other hand, usually occurs when we already possess something and we feel that what we possess is being threatened by another. And so envy is a reaction to us lacking something, and jealousy is our reaction to the threat of losing something. That was made plain to you all. It is interesting that the scripture condemns both envy and jealousy. So if you felt that, well, I only be jealous, I don't be envious, the scripture condemns them both. Now today I'm not going to be dwelling on jealousy, but more so on envy. And I think that it's important that we be practical with these things, because envy is one of those sins that we do not regard as sins ordinarily. A lot of us are comfortable in this position. But I want us to understand that envy is destructive, highly destructive. It adversely impacts us spiritually and mentally. Envy robs us of our joy. It takes away our contentment and our happiness. The sin of envy, and it is a sin, is raised to the same level as sexual immorality and impurity and drunkenness and orgies and all of those things. And that small sin of envy can result in us being denied access to heaven. In fact, in Galatians chapter 5, in verse number 19 through 21, we are told, it says, now the works of the flesh are evident. These things are evident. He says, sexual immorality, impurity, sensuality, idolatry, sorcery, enmity and strife, jealousy, fits of rage, rivalries, dissensions, divisions, envy, drunkenness. And the things like these, he says, I warn you as I warned before, that those who do such things will not inherit the kingdom of God. And so we are told plainly that envy will deny us access to heaven. Envy serves no useful or productive purpose in the life of a Christian. Envy serves no useful purpose in the life of a Christian. Now, if the world want to practice envy, let them practice it. But it serves absolutely no purpose in our lives. In fact, envy steals our peace. And it takes away the contentment that we so long to have. It troubles our souls. And it eats away at our very existence. There is absolutely nothing good that could come to you or can accrue to you by harboring an envious spirit. In Proverbs chapter 14 and verse number 30, we are told a heart at peace gives life to the body, A heart at peace gives life to the body, but envy rots the bones. Envy rots the bones. We ought to be persons who ought to stay far away from this thing called envy. Each of us are special. None of us are the same. Even twins are different. They may look the same, but they are different. All of us are special. All of us are unique, and we ought to appreciate that fact. That God has made us special, each and every one of us. The psalmist David tells us this in Psalms 139 and verse number 13. He says when he declared that he is fearfully and wonderfully made. And I want to tell you today that you, each and every one of us, we are fearfully and wonderfully made, and we must appreciate that fact. God has a plan for each and every one of us. And that plan is unique to each and every one of us. And we are not to allow envy, that longing for what another has, to eat us up and to destroy us and to make us feel less than. When we have envies in our hearts, we dethrone God in our lives, and instead we replace him with Satan. You see, God cannot dwell in a heart that is envious. That's the domain of Satan. And when we have an envious spirit within us, that means that we are allowing Satan to dominate our lives. We are allowing Satan to manifest himself in our lives. It was the former British Prime Minister, the Iron Lady, Margaret Thatcher, that once said that the spirit of envy can destroy. It can never build. The spirit of envy can destroy. It can never build. You know, there's an old legend, a Greek legend that is told. It is told about two athletes who ran in a race. The one that won the race, he ran so magnificently that it was decided that they needed to erect a statue in his honor. The man that came in second, he ran also a good race and a close race, but he did not win. And he had an envious spirit. He allowed envy to overtake his heart. And so each day as he looked at the statue of the man who won the race, he recounted and recalled how he came in second to this man. He remembers the honor that was bestowed upon the winner of the race. And it ate away at him because he wanted to have what this man had. And to the extent that he decided that, look, I cannot continue to look at this statue. And so late each night when everybody was asleep, he would go out and he would go with his chisel and he would chisel away at the base of this statue. You see, he wanted this statue to tumble and to fall and to be destroyed. And so every night he went and he chipped and he chipped and he chipped away at this statue, hoping that it would fall. And one night, as he chipped away at the statue, because of the envious spirit that he had in him, the statue would fall, but it fell on him and it killed him. You see, he was killed by the envy that he had in his heart. And if we are not careful, we will also be destroyed by that bitter spirit of envy that we have in our hearts. But you know, this man died long before that statue actually fell upon him, you know. He died each time, every time he struck a blow on the base of that statue, he was dying. And he eventually passed away when the statue actually fell on him. Envy is not productive. It can bring absolutely nothing good in our lives. So the Iron Lady was indeed correct when she said that the spirit of envy can destroy. It causes us to be destructive.
Yes, sir.
It can never build, and it never builds up another. It will not build you, nor the person who you are envying. So what about you? Will you allow this destructive nature of envy to destroy you? Will you allow envy to so rock your heart that you fail to be what God has called you to be? You know, earlier this month when I spoke to you, I mentioned to you that when you dig one ditch, you better dig two. And the story of Daniel exemplifies this principle of when you plot against another, you better be careful lest you fall into the same snare that you are setting up for the individual. The life of Daniel also is an excellent illustration on the destructive nature of envy. And I want you to turn with me in Daniel chapter 6. As I look at this text, beginning in verse number 1, it says, "And it pleased Darius to set over the kingdom 120 satraps, to be over the whole kingdom, and over these 3 governors, of whom Daniel was one." So you all get the picture. You had some satraps, you had the governors, and of these 3 governors, Daniel was one of the governors. That the satraps might give an account to them, so that the king would suffer no loss. So their job was to make sure that the king suffer no loss. Then this Daniel distinguished himself above the governors and the satraps, because an excellent spirit was in him. Not because he brown-nosed to Darius, not because he curried favor to Darius, but because an excellent spirit, he had a good work ethic. He did the man's work when he was required to do the man's work. He had a good attitude when he was required to have a good attitude. And so the king gave thought to setting him over the whole realm. The king said, well, I'm going to give this man so good, I'm going to give him everything. This is a foreigner now. This is a Hebrew. And so Daniel distinguished himself among the 3 leaders, the 3 governors, among the satraps, because of the excellent spirit that he possessed, because of the attitude that he had on his job. And that's a good thing for us to look at, the attitude that we have on our jobs. And no doubt because of the attitude that he had generally in his life. And because of these things, he was being considered for a more senior position. The king is given thought to setting him over the whole realm. And so in my mind, that tells me that he would be second only to the king. However, his good fortune, his hard work, his good attitude, his good fortune made him an object for attack. And that's how it is. People don't want you to be successful. Sometimes when you try to do good on your jobs, everybody else who want to be slack, they can tell you, but don't do that, man. You know, you're trying to show us up.
Talk to me.
And because Daniel was a vindictive individual, he was not an individual who was seeking to hurt these individuals professionally. He simply was trying to do the man's job. And because it was being contemplated to promote him to the highest level in the civil service in that day, Brother Hasty, he became the object of attack. And that subjected him to envy from his colleagues. And so they began to plot against Daniel. And I want you to see that people who are envious, they tend to always want to bring others around to their way of thinking. They sought to involve, these individuals sought to involve everybody. The governors, the satraps, and as we go on in this text, you will soon see the other counselors in the kingdom. they drew into this ring of conspirators. You know, I've concluded that misery this people always say misery likes company, but envy is similar to misery. Envy loves company. Misery only likes. Envy loves. So in verse number 4, we see that so the governors and the satrap, they sought to find some charge against Daniel concerning the kingdom. They could find no charge or fault because he was faithful, nor was there any error or fault found in him. Then these men said, we shall find no charge against this Daniel, unless we find it against him concerning the law of his God. And so these governors and the satrap and they throned, they rushed and they went before the king, and they said thus to the king, King Darius live forever. And all the governors of the kingdom and administrators and the satraps and the counselors and the advisors. See all the people they bringing in here now? It was the governors and the satraps. Now they're bringing in the counselors and the advisors. It says we have consulted together, and we think it wise that you establish a royal statute and make a firm decree that whoever petitions any god or man for 30 days except you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions. Now, O king, establish a decree and sign it in writing, so that it cannot be changed, according to the laws of the Medes and the Persians, which does not alter. And therefore Darius signed the decree. But I want you to notice that they found no charge, no fault in Daniel because he was faithful. You would think that after they tried to dig up some dirt on Daniel and they found no dirt, that they would stop. And they would leave that good man alone. But I tell you, when you have that envious spirit in you, if you can't find no dirt, you create your own dirt. And that's what these individuals decided that they were going to do. They went and they made some dirt. There was no skeletons in his closet. And so his self-appointed enemies, I say self-appointed because Daniel was a good man. He didn't do these guys anything. They regarded him as an enemy because of his goodness. They went out and they manufactured dirt. And they knew that they would not find anything concerning his job. And so they said, well, look here, we need to make a conflict between his job and his God. And so they went about and they conspired and they came up with this conflict. These men knew Daniel very well. They knew he was a good man. They knew they was not going to find any dirt, although they look. And they knew how to conspire to try to trip him up. They knew that he would be faithful to his God. If there was something that was going to conflict with his devotion, his commitment to his God, Daniel would be devoted and committed to his God. And so they say, I know we got him now. But what is this testimony? What is our testimony in our lives? What can be said of us? Can individuals say, well, I know that I ain't going to find nothing on him or her, but I know if I put a conflict, create this conflict, having to choose between their job and their country, or their job and their God, what they will do. These men knew that they had Daniel, because they knew he was going to go on the God side of his God. But it also appears that they knew King Darius. They knew that they could swing him because they knew he was a prideful man. And so they went and they appealed to his pride. And they suggested that the kingdom be compelled to acknowledge him, to pray to him. But notice they only said for a limited period. They didn't want to pay homage to the king forever. They only wanted to do it for a short time, long enough to catch Daniel. Because they say, well, 30 days, and within 30-day period, nobody can catch him. He may sneak, he may hide, but we can get him. And so with this skillful pretense, they urged King Darius to sign this decree into law. And it was irrevocable, irreversible. You couldn't go back on it. And they knew that. And that's the type law that they wanted them to sign. Because they know that the king had a soft heart towards Daniel. And envy leads from one sin to the next, to the next. And so to get this conspiracy going, they ran and they lied to the king. They said to the king that all of the governors and the consulars, we have consulted together, the trust satraps, we consulted together. Was not Daniel one of the governors? Did you think that Daniel would agree to do such a thing? And so they lied. They began with a lie. Daniel wasn't consulted. Because Daniel knew who he ought to worship. But they made the king believe that everybody was on board with this thing. They made the king sign it in accordance with the strictness of the laws of the land. And so that not even the king could reverse the law that he would have enacted. And they put this penalty in that law, that anyone who offended that law will be thrown in the den of lions. Now these lions don't play. Lions do not play. They are not called the king of the jungle they're called the king of the jungle because they know how to kill. They know how to kill, and we can see they know how to kill as we go on. In verse number 10. Now when Daniel knew that the writing was signed, he went home. And in the upper room, with his window open towards Jerusalem, he knelt down on his knees 3 times a day and prayed and gave thanks before his God, as was his custom since the early days. Then these men assembled and they found Daniel praying. He says, when Daniel knew, as soon as Daniel knew that the law was signed, Daniel did not allow that to shake his faith. Daniel knew he was a praying man, and he went home and he prayed just as he was supposed to pray. Daniel didn't close his door, close his window. Daniel did it just as he did it. If they see me, they see me. I got to do what I have to do. That was his mindset. And so the guys didn't even need 30 days. They should have said, King, let's do this for 2 days. It says these men assembled, these conspirators, they assembled and they found Daniel praying and making supplication before his God. And so no doubt they were listening. Had the witnesses there to say, he ain't praying towards Darius, he praying to his God. And they went before the king and they spoke concerning the king's decree. And they remind the king, they know the king have a soft spot in his heart for Daniel. And they said, have you not signed a decree that every man who petitions any god or man within 30 days, except you, O king, shall be cast into the den of lions? They reminded him, before they tell him, before they pin Daniel off, they reminded the king of what he would have signed. And the king answered and said, the thing is true, according to the law of the Medes and the Persians, which does not alter. And that's all they needed to hear. And so they answered before the king and said, that Daniel, the one who is one of the captives from Judah, that foreigner, that one who is not one of us, does not show due regard to you, O king, or for the decree you have signed, but makes his petition 3 times a day, not just once, not twice, but 3 times a day. And the king, when he heard these words, was greatly displeased with himself. Darius had some good. He was not angry with Daniel. I think he recognized at this point that he was set up. He was set up. He recognized that These men set him up to get at Daniel. He knew that they were player hating. That's what the young people say, right? Daniel. And immediately, it says, and set his heart on Daniel to deliver him. And he labored till the going down of the sun to deliver him. And these men approached the king and said, O king, know, O king, that the law of the Medes and the Persians, that no decree or statute which the king establishes may be changed. And they reminded the king, I know you feel like you look like you're trying to wobble under this decision, but the law is the law, and the law must be followed. The law cannot be changed. You can't even change your words. And so, when tested, Daniel was loyal to his God. He was a loyal subject to the king also. But Daniel knew that the King of Kings deserved a greater level or measure of loyalty than any man. And I need to stop there because sometimes we hold some politicians higher than God. And we hold political parties. We have more esteem for all the political parties than we have for the Lord's church. And I know that because even if it's raining outside, you all will go. No, I ain't saying where they go. They go where they go, and they assemble where they assemble in the rain to listen to the politicians talk. And if it's raining outside and we inside and this building ain't leaking, people can't come in here to worship God. So I know that we ain't no Daniel. Because if we were Daniels, we would understand where our loyalty should lie. Daniel refused to give to the king that measure of obedience and loyalty which belonged only to his God. And the level of allegiance that we have to politicians and the political parties, I don't care which one you're going with, you know, as you all know, I go either way. Y'all trying to figure me out like I've been with them all. I'm with them all. I support them all. But I tell you, there should be a greater level of loyalty towards God than towards man and towards politics. We see it so blatantly in another country. Politics is a dangerous thing.
Yes, sir.
We got evil and wicked individuals. And we got people who claim to be religious, claim to be ethical and moral, and they refuse to call a spade a spade.
Lord.
Some perhaps may have thought that Daniel was taking a great risk in praying to his God, as was his custom, knowing that the king's edict would, if he offend the laws or the statute that was given, that will end up in him being in the lion's den. But you know, Daniel, it wasn't a hard decision for Daniel, you know. Daniel knew that the safest thing that he could do was to be committed and loyal to his God. And so, with the lie being told on Daniel, and the king being convinced, and him now recognizing that he was tricked, he was displeased with himself, and he sought ways to see if he could get out of what he got himself in, to the going down of the sun. He labored till the going down of the sun. He looked, no doubt, at the laws, and he turned it out inside out to try to see if there was a way of escape that he could have got Daniel out of that predicament. And in verse number 16, we are told, so the king gave the command, and so they brought Daniel and they cast him into the lion's den because there was no way of escape. And the king spoke, saying to Daniel, your God whom you serve continually, he will deliver you. I can't do nothing for you, Daniel. But the God whom you are committed to, he will deliver you. He is talking like a man of faith, isn't he? Clearly, he saw the commitment in Daniel. He saw the faith that Daniel had in his God. He saw the loyalty that Daniel had in his God. And no doubt he had to conclude that for a man to be willing to face the lions, he must be serving the true and the living God. And so then a stone was brought and laid at the mouth of the dead. And the king sealed it with his own signet ring and with the signets of the lords, that the purpose concerning Daniel may not be changed. Now the king went to his palace and he spent the night fasting, and new musicians were brought in before him. Also his sleep went from him. The king had a heavy heart. He did not eat that night, nor did he have any entertainment. There was no festivities and happy hour and stuff going on that night. Sleep would not even come to his eyes, because he recognized that a good man fell victim to some evil men. And he hoped that Daniel's God would deliver him because of his faith in his God. The king indeed did try his best, but now even he realized that it was up to Daniel's God to deliver him. And verse number 19 says, then the king said, the lion arose. The king arose very early in the morning and went in haste to the lion's den. He could not sleep. And no doubt he was looking out the palace and saying, soon as first light, just a hint of the sun will come up. The king arose early in the morning and he went in haste to the den of lions. And he came to the den, he cried out with a lamenting voice. The king spoke, saying to Daniel, Daniel, servant of the Most High. Sorry, I put words in there. He ought to have said that. He says, Daniel, servant of the living God, has your God whom you serve continually been able to deliver you from the lions? And no doubt waiting to hear the response. Then Daniel said to the king, O king, live forever. My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths, so that they have not hurt me, because I was found innocent before him. And also, O king, I have done no wrong before you. Then the king was exceedingly glad for him, and he commanded that they should take Daniel up out of the den. And so Daniel was taken up out of the den, and no injury, not even a scratch whatsoever was found on him, because he believed in his God. I did something here, lost my way. But Daniel believed in his God, and God delivered Daniel from the lion's den. Hebrews chapter 1 and verse number 14 tells us that concerning angels, that they are ministering spirits, and they are sent forth to help those who will inherit salvation. And there are times when we find ourselves in the lion's den, that God, if you're faithful to God, that God will indeed send his angel to shut those lions' mouths. Daniel was a good man. He's a good man, that even when the Hebrew writer decided to look back in history and decide who among the people of God, the men of God, should I put in this hall of fame of faith, Daniel's name came forward, and he says in Hebrews chapter 11 verse number 33, for as Daniel is one, he says, by his faith he stopped the mouth of the lions. Daniel's faith worked for him. Daniel's faith saved him. But the fate of those who envied and plotted against Daniel could not save them. And in verse number 24 it says, and the king gave the command and brought those men who had accused Daniel. He said, give me every last one of those envious fellas. Bring them here.
That's right.
And he cast them into the lion's den. And not only them, remember I said, envy can destroy, it can only break down, it can never build up. They were thrown in the lion's den. It says, also their children and their wives. And the scripture gave us some vivid description as to what happened. And says, and the lions overpowered them. You all ever throw food to a dog and the dog jump up and catch it? You all did that before? Okay, watch this. It says, and the lions overpowered them and break all their bones in pieces before they ever came to the bottom of the den. They didn't even hit ground. As soon as they were falling, the lion caught them and did what he had to do. Broke all their bones into pieces before they ever came to the ground. No one had to tell Darius, you need to get rid of these envious individuals. Because today is Daniel, tomorrow it can be you. And so the king decided that he's going to clean house. And his cleaning went beyond just those persons who offended their children and their wives, and that may seem harsh. But it was also according to the ancient customs among the Persians. And the custom said, on account of the guilt of one, all the kindred perish. And so they wanted Daniel to be held accountable to their strict laws, and they were also held accountable to their strict laws and their strict customs. And so what is the moral of the story? The moral of the story is that the fruit of envy is self-destruction. And we see it time and time again that no good thing ever comes from envy. Daniel's enemies, motivated by envy, intended to cause his removal or from him ascending to higher office. And not only that, they intended to cause his death. But God protected his man. He preserved his life because he was a faithful servant. Let me tell you something. When you fight against the servant of God, you better be careful. That's like fighting against God. So as I conclude, let's be careful when we try to tear down, particularly if God has established someone. Be careful how you try to tear them down. Lest we find ourselves fighting against the will of God. Remember that disgruntled athlete. Remember Daniel's colleagues, the governors and the satraps and the counselors and advisors. All of them came to learn a very hard and difficult lesson. That there is no useful purpose in envy except to destroy oneself. All the purveyors of envy, all those who engendered this envy, that they hadn't placed this envy in the hearts of others to cause them to fall for this trick of the devil, all of them were destroyed. Church, let us not fall into Satan's trap. Thatcher was right. The spirit of envy can destroy, it can never build up. I want us to remember that. And let us try to live and try to be the people that God has called us to be. That's all I have to say to you all today. If you require prayers for anything, we are here to pray with you. I want to invite you to stand as the song leader comes before us.
915.